So, welcome everyone to this session of Sahaja Yoga meditation. And what I'm going to do, as I usually do, is give a talk about a particular subject, which I hope you'll find interesting tonight. And then, as always, we'll play an extract from a talk of Sri Mataji's, which is kind of chimes in a little with what I'm going to talk about. And then we'll have a period of meditation to finish with. So tonight I thought I would talk about a fairy tale. This is a beautiful Greek story called The Wild Man, and I mention it in my book Sahaj, which is an introduction to Sahaja Yoga, which Sri Mataji asked me to write many years ago. This story, The Wild Man, is widely told across Europe, and probably its most famous variant is the Grimm's version, the German version, Iron John, sometimes called Iron Hans. And actually, there was an American poet who wrote a whole book about this story, Iron John, that's what he called his book, where he focuses on the theme of masculinity, I believe. I haven't read it, but I see the story slightly differently. So I'm going to tell you the story very briefly in sort of chunks, but and I'm going to kind of comment on it a little. I mean, for many people, I'm sure fairy tales are just stories. That's all. They're nice stories, and that's all there is to them. But for others, like Jung, for example, they have a deep symbolic meaning. There are symbols in the motifs that recur again and again in different parts of the world in these fairy tales. So, the wild man. The first part of the story goes like this. A king captures a wild man, usually described as being made of iron or having skin like iron. But in any case, he's immensely strong. As long as the king possesses him, locked up in a cage to keep him there, his kingdom is safe. In the Grimm's version, the king sends a huntsman out into the great forest nearby, near his palace, to hunt deer, but the huntsman doesn't return. The king sends more men into the forest, but they all meet with the same fate. He sends more and more until all his huntsmen have vanished in this forest and not come back. So the king proclaims that this forest is dangerous and no one's to go there. Then one day, a man turns up who claims to be able to find out what happened to the huntsman. He goes there, the king gives him permission, and briefly he loses his dog in a lake in the woods. He returns with some men and they drain the lake, and at the bottom of it lies a naked wild man with iron skin. So we could say the lake, I mean, often the sea is used, but here it's just a lake, represents the unconscious. Water represents the unconscious. It's quite a common motif. So it's like they've brought this wild man up from the other world of the unconscious into consciousness to a point. And they bring him back to the court and the king has him locked in a cage. In the Greek version, which is, at least in the telling I have here, by Ruth Manning Sanders, who wrote a lot of books of fairy tales, not her own, but other people's, old fairy tales. She wrote them, rewrote them for children in a series of books, and she did it very beautifully, I must say. So in the Greek version, it starts slightly differently. There's a king, and he's worried that his kingdom is poor and at the mercy of anyone who chooses to invade him. And one day, while he's worrying about this, he meets a monk. And the monk asks him what his problem is. And I'll read you a little extract. Said the king, I may well sigh and groan. I have scarcely any money and very few soldiers. One day an enemy will come and drive me out of my kingdom. Is that all? Said the monk. On a mountain in a wilderness there lives a wild man whom all the world dreads because of his strength. Send men to seize him. When you possess that wild man, no king on earth will dare invade your kingdom. The king went back to the palace and called his counselors together. He told them what the monk had said, but they shook their heads. How is it possible, O king, to catch that wild man? Not one of us is equal to the task. We see no way unless he who told you of him will go himself and seize him. Next day the king went again to the place where he had met the monk, and the monk was there. Said the monk, have you arranged for the catching of this wild man? Said the king, I told my counselors, and they say that they cannot do it. They say he who gave me advice must do it, and so I have come to you again. The monk said, give me 40,000 men, O king. Make me a chain of copper weighing 100,000 pounds. Make me also an iron cage, of which each bar is like a column, and I will bring the wild man to you. So the king does that, and they bring the wild man, and he's locked in a cage. So the monk, we can say, is a kind of guru figure. I mean, when we analyze fairy tales, there's never a one-to-one relationship between the story or the scene in it and something meaningful, something spiritual. It's more a matter of suggestion and hints and who is interpreting it. So it means one thing to me and it might mean something different, slightly different or very different to someone else. But to me, this monk is a guru figure. So the wild man is brought back and he's put in the cage. Then the next thing that happens in both the Grimm's and the Greek version is that the king's young son is playing with a ball, which accidentally rolls into the wild man's cage. In both versions, it's a golden ball. This is a very positive motif. Being perfectly round, a ball symbolizes wholeness, completeness, totality, or perhaps we should say potential wholeness, because it's just a ball. It also symbolizes searching and finding something. There's a common motif in fairy tales. For instance, there's a beautiful Russian tale, The Three Kingdoms, Copper, Silver, and Gold. And in that, Eleanor the Fair, the princess, tells Prince Ivan, here is a golden ball for you. Roll it before you and follow it. It will lead you where you want to go. So here it's just led it straight into the wild man's cage. And the wild man says he'll only give the ball back to the young prince if he releases him. So the prince, after a bit of umming and ahhing, fetches the key from the guard room and unlocks the cage. And in the Greek version, which I'm mostly going to follow now, the wild man runs away. When the king returns, he's furious. Everything has come to nothing, all his work of catching this wild man. First, he's going to kill the guard, who was neglectful, but the guard explains that it was the young prince who took the key. Then the king is going to kill the prince, his own son. Eventually, he's persuaded to allow him to live, but he must be sent away because he never wants to see him again. And he's afraid that if he does see his son again, his temper will get the better of him and he'll want to kill him again. Actually, in the Grimm's version, the prince has no idea where to find the key, and the wild man tells him. So it's like the wild man, although he's locked in this cage, he knows everything. And she says it's under the queen's pillow, under his mother's pillow. In other words, there's a connection between the key to the cage that releases the wild man and the mother's. Might be interesting. Anyway, the poor boy is forced to leave his home and his comfortable life. So the queen, first of all, she tells him to go and hide because the king is stomping around with his sword out. And then she goes to the hiding place and she's weeping and she says, "My little son, I must send you away." And she ordered a pair of stout shoes to be made for him. And into each shoe she put 50 gold pieces. She brought him a peasant's dress and put it on him and said, "You must forget your name and go into a foreign land where none knows you. For should your father hear where you are, he will seek you out and kill you. But one thing I pray you, my little son, wherever you are, learn your letters, that you may not grow up to be an oaf to shame your birth. See, I have put into your shoes 100 gold pieces. Spend them to gather learning, and may the good God keep you." And she embraced him and wept over him and sent him on his way. So the prince goes off, and the first person he meets is a swineherd, and he finds work with him. In other words, he takes up a very lowly position, about almost the lowest in society. But he does the job very well, very thoroughly, and the farmer is very impressed with him. But the boy, the prince, he knows he needs to improve his learning. He needs to get a proper education. So after a while, he leaves the swineherd, and the next person he meets is a shoemaker. He learns the trade again, and again becomes very good at it. We can say maybe that shoes represent the foundation of a human being in a way. I mean, they're what we stand on, stand in and on. So in a way, the prince is starting at the bottom of the human ladder, and it's an image of humility. Then when he's sort of established himself as a shoemaker, he finds a teacher and acquires all the knowledge he needs. And eventually there comes a time when the shoemaker says he wants to retire and hand the business over to the prince. Of course, he doesn't know he's a prince. And he wants to marry the prince to his daughter. The boy takes fright. He knows this is not his fate. So he moves on and becomes a goat herd. That's the next person he meets, is a goat herd. And then one day, as he was driving the animals home to their fold, a nanny goat broke loose from the herd and took to her heels. The boy ran after her to catch her, but she ran and ran and crossed one hill ridge, and there she stopped as if to wait for him. But no sooner did the prince come near her than she took to her heels again and up over another hill ridge, and there waited. And so when he came up with her, she was off again and crossed 7 hill ridges with him, chasing her, and down at last into a little valley, and there she stopped, content. The boy went to put his hand on her, and what did he see? There was the wild man standing at his side. The wild man embraced the boy and said, "Oh, my prince, what have you suffered? What you have suffered, I should say, for my sake. But I have been ever near you to keep you from evil, and now I will make you the greatest king in all the world. I enticed the nanny goat here that I might appear before you. Sit down now and rest." And the boy says that he can't sit down and rest. He has to take the goat back to his master and so on. So the wild man says, "Okay, do that and come back." And he went back, he returned to the valley among the hills, and the wild man was waiting for him. And he led him to a cave and said, "Look in here." The boy looked. The floor of the cave was glittering. It was piled up with gold coins. Said the wild man, "I have kept all these for you." And he fetched from the cave garments of cloth of gold. And he bid the boy take off his old clothes and put on these garments. And he did, and there he stood now, all shining, none handsomer, none more royal. The wild man led him on through the valley till they came to a marble slab lying on the ground. He lifted the slab, and under it there were steps going down. You will go down 300 steps, said the wild man, and you will come to 40 rooms, and in each room you will find a fairy. When you enter the first room, the fairy who dwells there will say, "What seek you here, O prince?" And you must answer, "I have come to look upon your beauty." Then she will be pleased and will bestow a gift upon you, and you will leave her and go into the second room, and it will go on like that. And when you have received these 40 gifts, one from each room, do not linger, lest they should cast their spells upon you to keep you. Flee from them and come quickly to me again. So he does all that. And to kind of bring it to a close now, we can say the wild man is like the spirit. There's something unaccountable about him. He's immensely powerful. But to begin with, he's a kind of ambiguous figure. We don't know whether he's to be trusted or to be feared. In a way, he condescends to become imprisoned in this cage. He allows himself to be captured. The boy frees him, and that's kind of, we could say, like getting his realization. He unlocks the spirit from, again, the unconscious. The cage is another sort of symbol of the unconscious. And the spirit appears to just vanish, go off, this wild man. But later, when finally he meets him, because the boy has been sensible, he achieves a certain maturity, he develops himself. He develops himself in a rounded way, practically and intellectually, using his intelligence, we can say. And it's only when he's reached a certain maturity that the spirit makes itself known properly. And then he says, "I was always with you, protecting you, although you didn't see me." One thing is, it's interesting that the wild man warns the prince not to linger and get entranced in those 40 rooms under the ground. It's as if to say, these blessings and powers that they're going to give you are all very well, and you deserve them, and they're to be used, but they're not the be-all and the end-all. So it's a beautiful story, I think, and it's particularly relevant to the theme of how we develop when we first get our realization and go on from there. Because for many of us, I mean, for me, I was, slow to develop. I knew I had something. This is real. I knew that from the very beginning when I first met Sri Mataji. But then to sort of develop it to the point where you feel, I have got something. It's not just that, well, let me put it like this. It's not that I've just got something, but I am that something also. To get to that point can take a lot of time and a lot of patience and a lot of humility, but it varies from person to person. So that's the end of this beautiful story. There is a little more, because eventually the king, the boy, returns to his mother. His father has died. She's so pleased to see him. And he's now the king himself. He's also acquired a wife. The wild man told him he must have a wife, and for balance, of course. And then all the jealous kings around attack his kingdom. And the wild man is still there. He says, "Don't worry about a thing. I will take care of it." And just like that, he destroys all these other armies. So there's no problem at all. The boy is completely protected and, in a way, completely powerful. So that's the story. And now I will ask Jitendra to turn to a beautiful talk of Sri Mataji's from Caxton Hall, sort of on the same.
Sahajogi here. I think some new people have come. Have we? Who else is there? Yeah, Suman is there. Now those who have got realization, those who have felt the vibrations, must know that they are now developing into another being. The germination has started, and you must allow the germination to work out its own way. But normally, when we get realization also, we do not realize that it is a tremendous thing that has happened within us. That this triggering, which is an impossibility, has taken place within us, and it has to work out slowly. It has to develop and evolve us into that. And because we do not feel it, we do not take it that seriously as we should, our realization. Moreover, they are surrounded by people who have not felt the vibrations. They do not know this area. They have never seen it. As Guru Nanak has called it, it is alakha. They have not seen it. They don't know about it. They don't know there is a power of God that exists, which understands, coordinates, cooperates with you, which is working in the collective being, which makes you aware of that collective being and of others also. This alakha, or we can call it aparoksha, which is not seen by anyone, which no one knows about. They talk about it. They talk about kingdom of God. They talk about God's powers, divine power. It's all talk, 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 talk. But once you are triggered into it, you have to grow into it. Unless and until you grow into it, you will be God. Things that they have been following, they don't know. How terrible these things are. Like you are in a crocodile, and suddenly you discover it's a crocodile. How fast you would run from that? But even the understanding that it is a crocodile and it is going to eat you off doesn't come up so easily. Are you going? All right. All right. So, bye-bye. And as I have told you, you tell your sister. You have to form the nucleus, and you have to write to me about it. And that you have to work out very well there. All right? You tell her what I have told you about Ireland. All right. May God bless you. Bye. Jim, are you going to? All right. So this one doesn't realize also. As you do not realize that triggering, which is the most difficult thing, has happened to you. It is difficult. But it has happened to you. You know why it has happened. You take that one for granted, and also you take the devils for granted. At least don't take the devils for granted. Run away from them as soon as possible. Meditate, meditate, and try to establish yourself in the realm of divine love. I say it is divine love. You cannot understand what divine love is. You cannot understand any human being who loves you only for love's sake. Just because that person loves you, he goes on loving because he enjoys that loving. In Sanskrit it is called avyaj, that there is no interest. Avyaj. It's just flowing. Even when it corrects you in love. And the protection of divine love is the only way you are germinating. That love gives you that warmth needed, that strength needed, that confidence needed. Everything is given to you by that divine love. So, one has to realize that it is love and love and love is the basis of all this creation. God has created this world, this universe, only because He loved. And He wants to bestow this blessing on you because He loves you. But how far you love yourself is the problem. How far you understand yourself is the problem. You do not evaluate yourself. And that is the reason why, though the Kundalini has risen and you have got realization, your vibrations are flowing, the growth is very slow. Because attention has been outside. And even after realization, it is outside. Sometimes it is sucked in, again it goes outside. Then we do not change our old habits at all. We go on sticking to those old habits. Our structure of life, our styles of thinking continue to be the same. Again we find ourselves lost into the same shambles. Now Sahaja Yoga gives you realization, all right. But also it gives you a long rope to hang yourself. If you do not pay heed to yourself and to your being, if you don't love yourself and understand that you are the instrument of God by which for the first time you are going to give realization to people. You are going to save people from getting drowned. And this is the first time you are made like that. This capability you never had and no human beings have, which you have got now today. Very few people had this capability. Very, very few people. But now you have got that capacity. And you do not want to evaluate yourself. How important it is. If you could realize, then you would work it out. Allow the blossoming to come up. On the contrary, I find, today because you are all Sahaja Yogis, I can talk to you like this. Normally it is about Kundalini and all that, but I find that you do not see the movements of your Kundalini. If you try to understand, she's the one who loves you the most. Because she's your individual mother. And if you try to follow her, you will see that she's suggesting where is the problem with you, what you have to correct, what you have to do. Because she wants to perfect you. She wants to help you. So if you start watching it carefully, with love, with understanding, she's very playful, extremely sweet, and full of beautiful plays like a little child. She will tickle you here and there, call for your attention. She doesn't trouble you. You have to be just alert about her. And she really matures. You have seen people with time how they have matured. But you have to pay attention to her and to yourself. Otherwise, what is your value without enlightenment? What is the value of a human being without enlightenment? What is the use of having human beings if they are not enlightened? What is the use of this instrument if it is not put to the means? The rest is all useless, isn't it? And it is you who have to raise the people. You have to enlighten the people. As we have some gas lights, you see. A man runs up to the gas lights to lighten them. He only has the power or capacity to do it.
Okay, so we'll just meditate now. We just put our attention to Sri Ganesh and ask his permission to address his mother, the Kundalini. We ask her assistance and ask her forgiveness for neglecting her when we neglect her. We ask to understand her play, her playfulness, and to enter into her playing that Sri Mataji was just speaking about. To be able to enjoy that play, to be sensitive to it. Let it work out with us. Have the patience and the humility and the wisdom to wait and to watch and to be aware of it working out within us. So I'll ask Jitendra to play some music. This is the Wahani Sisters, and if you started at about 2 minutes 30 seconds in, and hopefully there won't be any ads interrupting it, and then about 5 to 9, 10 to 9, we can come to a stop. Okay, thank you.
खास संगीत समारोह दरबार
Waterhouse Gardens is one of
Do you ever dream of being covered in Coleman's English mustard?
So that's it for this evening, and just like to thank people who've tuned in. And I hope you've enjoyed this session of Sahaja Yoga, this ocean of knowledge. So thank you to Jitendra, thank you to everybody, and I'll see you again next month. Jai Shri Mata.